Chapter 9, Key Issue 3. Content Objective. Describe the agricultural distribution, MDCs and LDCs. ICANN Statement 1. Identify the 11 major agricultural regions and explain the relation with climate and regions. 2. Explain the difference between extensive farming and intensive farming. 3. Explain how pastoral nomadism work in the drylands of developing regions. 4. Explain how shifting cultivation, also referred to as slash and burn, works in the tropics of developing regions. 5. Explain how intensive subsistent farming works in the high population concentration of developing countries. 6. Describe reasons for growing crops other than wet rice in intensive subsistence regions. 7. Describe how mixed crop and livestock farming works. 8. Describe the dairy farming and commercial gardening work and describe the distribution. 9. Explain how commercial intensive farming uses intercropping as a result of land depletion. 10. Describe how grain and Mediterranean farming works. 11. Describe how livestock ranching works and why it is depleting. Alright, we are not doing the jigsaw. Alright, there are 11 identified agricultural regions created by Whittlesey. Whittlesey identified regions in which 5 of those regions are in developing countries and 6 of those regions are in developed countries. He identified the 5 agricultural regions as intensive subsistent wet rice found in concentrations in East Asia and South Asia. He identified intensive subsistent wet rice non-dominant, which is found in East Asia and South Asia, where rice growing is difficult. He identified pastoral nomadism, which is the dry lands or arid lands of Southwest Asia, North Africa, Central Asia, and East Asia. Shifting cultivation, the tropical regions of Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia. And plantations found in Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Then for agricultural developed country regions, he found 6 regions as mixed crop and livestock, found in the Midwest, U.S. Midwest and Central Europe. Dairy, found in northeastern United States and northwestern Europe. Grain, found in the north-central region of the United States and Canada and Eastern Europe. Livestock ranching, found in the western area of the United States, Southeast Latin America and Central Asian, Sub-Saharan Africa, and South Pacific. And Mediterranean, which is found in Mediterranean climates in the west coast of the United States, the southern tip of Africa, and the coast of Chile. And then commercial gardening, found in southeastern United States and Southeast Australia. Here's a picture of the agricultural regions that he depicted. And he also referred to agricultural regions fitting a climate pattern, as we can see here with some of the rice, pastoral nomadism found in arid regions, and then rice found in tropical regions or warmer climate regions, and ranching found in dry, arid regions. Alright, so again, we look at agriculture and climate zones, and we can see that the major agricultural practices of the world can be divided into those prevalent regions where agriculture is practiced, so it plays a large role in what's produced agriculturally, especially in developing regions, and even in developed regions, like I pointed out with western United States, the dry climate caters to ranching. And here looks at the various climate zones and how they determine or have a large impact on what is the farming practice. Alright, let's take a look at developing regions. Pastoral nomadism is found in northern Africa and Southwest Asia. It is a practice that's found in the dry, arid desert regions of the world, so the Saharan Desert and the Arabian Desert, or the Ruba Akali. Pastoral nomadism is based on herding of domestic animals, where planting crops is impossible. And with that, they commonly do not eat their animals unless they are dead. They will consume the animals, but most of they will do, or most of what they'll eat are crops. That's used in bartering. And they do raise minimal crops to exchange in that bartering process. They are sedentary farmers. Some human geographers thought of pastoral nomadism as a preliminary form of subsistent farming, but now it's agreed upon, as noted in your 2020 text, that it is seen as subsistent farming, and it's sedentary, meaning they have territories that are strictly noted and defined, and those territories are shrinking because of modern technology of governments with controlling the lands and monitoring the lands with their advanced technology and eliminating traditional territories. It is an extensive subsistent farming, meaning it covers a large area of land. So in other words, minimal acreage is used for their minimal crop production. They commonly use transhumance, which is a seasonal migration of livestock between mountains and lowland pasture areas. Pasture is grass or other plants grown for feeding grazing animals, as well as land used for grazing. Here we have a look at some pastoral nomads in Turkey. And again, pastoral nomads will commonly use cattle in East Africa. Camels are well suited in most dry arid regions, so commonly found in the Saharan desert. Goats are used as well, to a lesser degree, because they'll virtually eat any vegetation. And then to a lesser degree, sheep are used because they're more selective in their vegetation they will consume. Here we see some more pastoral nomads in Mongolia. And pastoral nomads work in sugarcane fields. All right, the next developing form of agriculture is going to be shifting cultivation. Shifting cultivation is practiced in much of the world's tropical regions, climate regions as mentioned earlier, which have relatively high temperatures and abundant rainfall. It's practiced by roughly 250 million people, and it encompasses about 20% of the Earth's land. It's found in Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia. It's an extensive subsistent form of farming. And the extensive system of farming, again, uses wide areas of land in tropical regions and rainforests. In the soil, they will slash down forest, and then they will use that forest. Once they slash down the forest, they'll then plant crops in the depleted land. And when they plant the crops, they will commonly be good or remain most productive in year 2. They'll use them from anywhere to 1 to 5 years at most, usually 1 to 3. And then they'll let it lay fallow for 6 to 20 years. And it's, again, when they burn it, that the burning of the wood will give off nutrients to replenish the soil. The land ownership has been villages, collectively owned by villages, or controlled by small villages. Here's a picture in Mozambique of shifting cultivation. Again, the burning of the trees will give off nutrients that will replenish the soil. However, it's a very inefficient form of agriculture, one of the most inefficient forms of agriculture in the world, because the fertility really only lasts 3 years, and then they'll clear a new patch, or they'll clear an entirely new patch of tropical forest. Here's another picture of where we see shifting cultivation in Côte d'Ivoire in Western Africa. As already mentioned, when we talk about shifting cultivation, a lot of governments are discouraging it because of the harmful effects it has on the environment. It can have, on large-scale destruction, it can create climate change by burning of the trees. It releases carbon dioxide that can give off a greenhouse gas effect. Here's a look at shifting cultivation slash and burn in Brazil. Again, the future of shifting cultivation is going to be phased out, although shifting cultivation is seen as a step for economic development, but it should be replaced by more sophisticated agricultural techniques. And some of it's being replaced by logging, cattle ranching, cultivating of cash crops, selling timber to builders, or raising beef cattle for fast food restaurants, as we see here with cattle ranching in Brazil, which is the third largest producer of beef, and a lot of that beef that they raise is sold to fast food restaurants. All right, intensive subsistent agriculture is the third agricultural region. Intensive subsistent farming is farmers must work intensively to subsist on a parcel of land. That's what intensive means. So a great amount of work per acre of land. Feeds about 3/4 of the world's people in developing regions. They're found in agriculturally dense regions of the world, such as East Asia and Southeast Asia. Most of the farmers do the work by hand, and so it's hard labor. They have, in some cases, animals. Virtually all the land is used intensively, leaving no space. Again, narrow roads and building up right to the house of the farmers, of the family farmers. And the parcels of land are significantly small. Some of the intensive subsistent farming that we see in southern China, not all of China can grow intensive subsistent farming for wet rice, but some of it we see is in the warmer climates in southern China, and then other parts of like Taiwan. And it's an intensive process from developing the seed in a nursery to planting it in the flooded field, the paddy or the sawa, and then the seedling or the rice plants are harvested with knives, and it's an intensive process where they separate the seed by thrashing it with the husks on the ground. The threshed rice is placed on a tray for winnowing, on which the lighter chaff is allowed to be blown away by the wind. Here's a look at rice production. Recently shifting of China outsourcing to Southeast Asia. We see right there. But again, the distribution is found in climate zones that are tropical or warm climates. It's also important to note that 50% of the world's rice production is found in India and China. However, 90%, or more than 90% of rice production is found in East, South, and Southeast Asia. So, again, we look at this region of the world, and they produce 90% of the rice in the world. Here's a look at the intensive work of a rice planter. Here's some other pictures of showing the process from flooding of the fields. They're called sawa or paddies, to the rice seedlings, to the plowing of the fields. Intensive wet rice, as already mentioned, is found in these regions of the world. It feeds 2/3 of the world's population. Only Southeast China can grow rice, which was already mentioned. Climate prevents farmers from growing wet rice in portions of Asia. But like in China, they'll use double cropping with rice planting in Southeast China. So double cropping is when it's common when there's warm winters. It's rare in India, but it's common in China, so they have dry winters. Normally, double cropping involves altering between wet rice and then in the summer when precipitation is higher, and wheat and barley or another dry crop will be grown in the drier winter season. So with double cropping, they'll plant rice in the summer, and then they'll plant grain of either wheat, barley in the winter months. All right, here's a look at where we see the distribution of wet rice agriculture in India. Again, climates that are, have a lot of water and are tropical. There's a look at paddies or sawa. Intensive non-wet rice. Intensive non-wet rice is going to be areas of the world that are going to be more dry and not as wet, or and regions of the world that don't have as much precipitation. When we look at non-dominant rice, it's the interior of India, northeast China, crops other than rice. So we're looking at the main traded crop in the world, which is wheat grain, which is a grain, the grain of wheat, and some other crops are sold for cash like cotton, flax, hemp, and tobacco. North and south split agriculture we see in China, India, Russia. Again, and we see it in the U.S. too. The northern part or the Midwest, it grows the wheat and grows the grains. There's the corn belt, which is the Midwest, growing corn. Plantation farms is another form of farming in less developed regions. With plantation farms, they're large commercial farms in developing countries. They specialize in one or two crops. Those are called cash crops. It's seen as monoculture cropping. So specializing in one crop is monoculture cropping. They're found in tropical regions or subtropical regions, Latin America, Africa, and Asia. They're owned by and operated by European and North American multinational or transnational corporations. The food is mostly consumed in core countries. Here's a look at plantations. So again, extensive form of farming, covering a large area of land. Again, here's a look at urban subsistence farming, and some of these ideas we see: small garden plots, backyard livestock, fish ponds, rooftops in Mexico City, dirt strips in Kolkata, garbage dumps in Jakarta. They can help human waste from running off in erosion by composting. Some negatives, though, is the untreated waste as fertilizer that can expose to fertilizers or other infectious diseases such as cholera and hepatitis. All right, aquaculture. Aquaculture is fishing where you capture fish. It's cultivation of seafood under controlled conditions, as you can see right here. Aquaculture has contributed to the rise of fish production and human consumption. In fact, when we look at consumption of fish, in 1960, 27 million metric tons of fish were consumed. And then in 2016, 141 million metric tons were consumed. 5/6 of that increase has been human consumption in developing countries. There are zones in the world. They're divided into 16 major fishing regions, as you can see right here. These dots represent the 16 regions. And China is responsible for nearly a third of all world's yield of fish. East Asia and South Asia are the greatest fish producers. Fish consumption. Again, 132 million in 2012, but in 2016 it rose to 141 million metric ton. And fish consumption has grown more rapidly than population growth. We can see human consumption of fish on the left and production on the right, so we can see production hasn't kept pace with growth of population, and it's also led to overfishing. Overfishing has been identified, or it's been identified as particular areas in the North Atlantic, Pacific Ocean. It's reduced the population of tuna and swordfish by nearly 90% in the last half century. For instance, the United Nations estimates that 1/4 of fish stocks have been overfished and 1/2 fully exploited, leaving only 1/4 underfished in the world. All right, and that's just what I mentioned. All right. Let's go to developed regions of the world where they have mixed crop and livestock, dairying, grain, ranching, Mediterranean, and commercial gardening, also known as truck farming. All right, let's start with the 6 agricultural regions. Again, it shows us where we might find some of these farming practices. Like I said, ranching or mixed crop and livestock is going to follow a humid continental climate. Again, ranching and we're in brown and it's dry. Agribusinesses we talked about in the previous notes, but in agribusiness, within these forms of agriculture in developed regions is a large corporation that has led to commercial farms. As I already mentioned, most farms are controlled by small family farms, but they are associated with an agribusiness. So the family farm is in collaboration with an agribusiness, which is a multinational corporation that integrates into a larger food production industry by providing seeds and distributions and fertilizers and marketing and sales and distribution. They're a large player in developed agricultural regions. Mixed crop and livestock, as you see right here. Mixed crop and livestock is a traditional practice. It derives from more than three-fourths of its income from sales of animal products. Most of the food is sold or is raised to feed the animals, not consumed by humans. They farm year-round to distribute the workload more evenly throughout the year. They'll use crop rotation. Crop rotation will again yield fertile land and more crop productivity. When we look at some of the consumption of these farms, there is limited human consumption, such as consuming oils or margarines, and most is fed to pig or cattle. Where we see a lot of mixed crop and livestock, it's extensive farming. Most farming we'll see within commercial developed regions will be extensive. However, there will be some exceptions. When we look at that, the distribution is found from Ohio to the Dakotas to the center of Iowa, which is called the Corn Belt. And soybeans is another production or another crop produced in mixed crop and livestock, because that's often a hidden ingredient in all food. All right, and again, this shows you the production of corn. Feeding the livestock, the crop production on the farms. All right, dairy farming is the next form of farming in developed regions of the world. Dairy farming, we can see it specializes in the production of milk and other dairy products. Because milk is so high perishable, it has a milk shed. That milk shed is the distance that you can travel with milk before it will spoil. That milk shed is typically 300 miles with refrigerated semis. So with that, we've had advancement modes of transportation Oftentimes it's situated in the first ring of large cities because of its perishability. This is an intensive form of commercial agriculture. It's intensive because it's labor intensive. Cows have to be milked twice a day, although the actual milking can be done by machines, but dairy farmers nonetheless require constant attention throughout the year. There's a winter feed that becomes very expensive and time consuming, so it's very intensive. Dairy farmers typically sell their milk to wholesalers, and then wholesalers sell it to processors. When we look at milk production that's not found in the milk shed, we'll see processors making like butter, cheese, or dried or evaporated or condensed milk. They stay fresh longer. These are common practices like in Wisconsin, our neighbor to the our neighbor to the Minnesota. Dairy farmers in the U.S. have declined. The concentration of dairy farms has been in the Northeast. And also think about the Northeast, the population distribution, the fifth highest population cluster in the world. Most of the milk is sold directly to the consumers that live in New York, Philadelphia, Boston, 3 large cities on the Northeast coast. And a lot of farmers are declining because of declining revenues and rising costs. Dairy farmers who have quit most often cite lack of profitability and excessive workload as reasons for getting out of the business. Here we look at milk production. Globally, we can see that India is the largest producer of milk. And again, dairy farming, metric tons, million metric tons. Moving on to commercial farms. Commercial farms are also referred to as truck farms. Commercial farming, they have a longer growing season, so it's found in the southeastern portion of the United States. Truck farming is an intensive commercial form of farming. It produces horticultural goods such as fruits and vegetables. It's become more specialized within productions of more profitable specialty goods that are sold to affluent consumers, such as asparagus or mushrooms or strawberries or peppers. There's limited farmland. It encourages more intensive use of land. And they do practice intercropping, so multiple crops that are grown within a field. Here's a look at a commercial agricultural farm or truck farming. In this case, the horticultural good is flower production. Commercial gardening has seen most of it sold to large processing companies such as like Kraft or General Mills. It's highly efficient, large-scale operations. As I mentioned, they become more specialized. They often bring in migrant farm workers for labor and hard-working ethic. And the specializations has increased the profitability of commercial farming. And here's an example of specialization we see in commercial farming with value added. You see the specialization of jellies and cheeses, which again has increased overall profit of truck farming or commercial farming. The next is grain farming. This is an extensive form of farming. These grains are primarily used for human consumption. It's heavily mechanized. The farms are extremely large. It's oriented to consumer preferences. That's why they use monocropping, which is a practice of growing the same single crop every year, year after year. That monocropping is seen in cereals and breads. We also see much of this farming. We look at the important grain is wheat, which was already mentioned. And when we look at wheat production, the largest producers of wheat in the world, the United States used to be the largest wheat producer in the 20th century, but now it ranks 4th. And China's number 1, and followed by India and Russia. And these are regions where it's too dry for mixed crop and livestock. So found in areas of the Dakotas known as the Spring Wheat Belt, or Washington State in the Paulius region, or southern Saskatchewan province in Canada. All right, there's the distribution. There it shows the Spring Belt and the Winter Wheat Belt. And commercial grain includes the production of wheat in developed countries, but developing countries are starting to produce wheat at higher levels as well. When we look at the movement of exports of grain, the United States and Canada account for about 1/4 of the world's wheat exports. Next is Mediterranean. Mediterranean is an intensive form of agriculture in developed regions. It's based on the climate. The climate where it's found is found in California, central Chile, southern Africa, southwest Australia, and the Mediterranean. They have to have prevailing winds, moderate winters. They have to have summers that are hot and dry. They have to have sea breezes. It has to be elevated on a hill or a mountain. And then it's often found along coastlines. They specialize in horticulture. Horticulture, their most important cash crops are olives and grapes. California is one of the largest regions in the U.S. for Mediterranean farming, where we see the production of grapes and citrus fruits and tree nuts and other fruits that are consumed in the U.S. Here's a look at the distribution of Mediterranean farms. Again, the west coast of the U.S., west coast of Chile, the Mediterranean Ocean, southern tip of South Africa, and the southern regions of Australia. Here's a look at a Mediterranean farm. And this is in Greece, where they're growing olives. Next is extensive livestock ranching. That is beef production. Livestock ranching is the commercial grazing of livestock over an extensive area of land, so it's an extensive form of agriculture. And it's done in semi-arid or arid lands. They develop in areas where it's too harsh to grow wheat or mixed crop and livestock. And they have a larger area that they roam. However, it's declining. Much of ranching today has been replaced by moving to local feedlots along major railroads or highway routes. And many ranchers have converted to growing cash crops instead of ranching because of the efficiency of feedlots. Here shows a cattle ranch in western Texas. The type of animal raised depends on cultural preferences, so we can see the distribution of meat proteins. Ranching tends to take place in developed countries. There shows the Chisholm Trail during the cattle runs in the 1860s and 70s. And this shows the importance of feedlots today because, again, it's more cost efficient. It uses less space than cattle ranching. And the feedlots, rural areas, the concern is rural areas and the runoff of animal waste, which creates pollution in our local waterways. There's meat production again in 2018. All right, take a moment to review. A lot of information was covered, so take your time to make sure you review everything that was covered. All right, and this shows the regions in the U.S. And again, here are some more review questions to make sure you fully understand today's lesson.